The way this class is going to work is for each of the modules, you're going to have a lesson that you do along with me with this tutorial. Then you'll also do a lesson out of the textbook. So for each of these videos, you just need to download the needed file and then follow along. For this lesson, what we're going to be focused on is getting to know your work area. So we're going to actually go into Photoshop, take a look around. I'm just going to kind of lead you through the basics. And then when we're done, you will submit the file to Canvas so that you get credit for participating. I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop. Okay, so this is what the opening screen or the home screen of Photoshop is going to look like. Yours is probably going to look slightly different based on a couple things. One, if depending on what version of Photoshop you're on, the pictures could look slightly different. Then also, if you haven't worked in Photoshop before, your recents down here will be black. So this is a projects I was working on for other classes, so they're popping up here. Okay, down the left-hand side is going to be where your options are. So you can create a new file. You can open a file that you already have. Home is the screen that we're currently on. Learn is where you can find some tutorials if you want to learn a little bit more about Photoshop. You can also go back to home from here, and then you can find your files that have been shared with you, Lightroom photos, and deleted files right here, okay? So what we're going to do is first, I'm just going to walk you through how to create a new file. We're going to work on a file that I've given you, but I wanted you to see how to create a new file and how it works. So click on the new file. When you come in here, it automatically will pop up on recent. Again, yours probably looks different than mine if you haven't worked in Photoshop recently. So these are files that I've created. So yours might be black. You can also save files. So if you create a, let's say 5x7 card, and you're going to be using that card a lot, you can save it to your new documents. That way, every time you go in, you can just click right in here. And then the rest of these are broken up by what they're usually used for. So you have photo, print, art illustration, web, mobile, film, and video. These have some presets in here that are pretty common for that use. It also shows all of your templates for that area. So if you have your own license for Photoshop, you can use, or for Adobe Cloud, you can use some of these templates. Now, every once in a while, I've found that there's a couple of the templates in here that you can use, even if it's not your license, if you're under the school license. But pretty much you have to have a license to Adobe to be able to use these, okay? If you are looking for a template and you don't have access to these, you simply can go to Google and Google free Photoshop templates or free Photoshop, like this one's a scrapbook collage templates, and find a lot of free ones out there. So it's not a big deal, but these are nice if you have access to them. Then over here on the right-hand side is where you can create a custom. So you can come in here, you can name it. You can say its width and its height. You can also tell it if you want it to be in inches, pixels, centimeters, millimeters, points, or picas. Whenever we're doing anything for this class, I'm going to tell you to make sure this is on inches. One of the biggest mistakes that people just make, they don't realize that if it's on pixels and they make it, 7 pixels and 7 inches are two totally different sizes. Very big difference. So if something pops up on your screen and it's like the size of like this little picture frame on your screen, you probably did this inches, okay? If it fills up your screen, I mean, you probably did that in pixels. If it fills up your screen, you probably did inches. Resolution, remember if you're going to be printing something or if there's a chance that you'll be printing it, you want your resolution at 300. If you know 100% for sure that you're never going to have to print it and it's just going to be seen digitally, you can do 72. Somewhere in the middle is about 150. It's a good fit for smaller prints or anything to be seen on screen. I always suggest when you're working in anything that you start at 300 because you can always down the size later. Okay, we're going to leave our color mode to RGB, our background contents to white. You can change it on here. This is really nice if you're going to be doing something for like a t-shirt design and you don't want a background color, you want it to be transparent, you can change it right here from the very get-go. And then working profile we'll leave, and we'll leave the pixels, okay? Then you would just hit create and it would create a new document. We're going to hit close though, because I want to open up a document and kind of go through this with something that's already done. So we're going to come up here to open, and I want you to locate the file that you downloaded from the module. And it should look like this. Okay. So with this, we're just going to kind of walk through. We're going to talk about the different workspaces. We're going to talk about the toolbar and some of the panel uses, and just kind of get a feel for the overall Photoshop. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take you to preferences. So you're going to go up to edit, the very top of the screen, and come all the way down to preferences. And just go ahead and click general at the very top. Now, what this is going to do is it allows you to go in here and set preferences to your liking or to what you do the most. There's only a couple things that I really ever change in here. One of them being I want to be working in inches instead of pixels. So I go in and I change that. Also, another helpful thing in here to change is your guides. So you can always come through here and take a look at it. Another one that's in here is the interface. A lot of people like to know where this is at because right now my screen is really dark. I prefer it to be dark. I prefer to actually sit in a dark room when I'm working in Photoshop. The white just kind of overwhelms. If you need it to be a brighter screen, you can change that. This is what the original Photoshop kind of looked like, or you can go even to black if you want. I do it on Photographer's Gray just because it shows you more of the true colors in your photograph. You can make any changes to that you want. But as you kind of come down through these, you'll see that you can make different changes. Depending on different tutorials that you might find online, it may have you come in here and change some stuff. But what we want to go to is right here where it says units and rulers. You should change your units on rulers to inches just because that's what we know the best. Type should be at points because if you've ever written a paper for an English teacher, you know, they say they want your paper written at 12 points with double spacing, blah, blah, blah. So we leave our type at points. Column size, we're not super worried about right now, but this is a good place if you're working on certain tutorials. You may have to come and change this. New document preset resolutions, anything for print will be at 300 and anything for screen should be at 72. Then we're going to come down here next to the guides. I just want to show you the guides because I've had students in the past that had some color blindness, or if you're working on a project and you know that it's going to have a whole lot of red in it, pinks might be kind of hard to see with the guide. So you can come in here and you can change your guide colors and make them so that they're easier for you to see. Another one that's down here is type. So if you need to make any changes to your type programs, it's all in here. Okay, and then you're going to hit OK, and we're going to go ahead and set that. The next thing I want you to look at is your workspaces. So the workspace is the overall screen that you're going to be seeing whenever you're working in Photoshop. All of Adobe programs, you can change your workspace based on what you're doing in that program at the time. So, you know, if you're doing something that's more print versus something that's a lot of text versus something that's purposely to be digital, you can change these workspaces, okay? You're going to find it up here under Window and Workspace. Now, I want you to make sure your Essentials is selected. So click it first, do Essentials. And then come back up to Window, Workspace, and do Reset Essentials. That's just going to make sure that we're on the same page. We're going to go ahead and create one specifically for this class. It's just going to come in handy that we're all on the same page while we're doing it. Then you can always change these based on what you're doing or how you like it, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Window and Workspace and just kind of show you the different areas. So you do have one that's called, yours should be blank up here for right now. We are going to create this one today. These are my customs. You're then going to have a 3D one that's graphic and web, one that's motion, one that's painting, and one that's photography. So if you're doing something in those areas specifically, these will be a little bit helpful to set your screen to. Now we do kind of a base generic one for our common custom one that we're doing right now. So it's just a good area to start in. You can also reset any of these when you're in them. So if you accidentally close something and you don't know where to find it, you can go to reset. You can create a new one. You can delete one. And then you can also change up your keyboard shortcuts right here. This is kind of nice once you get really familiar with Photoshop if you want to change any of your shortcuts. I know a lot of students that when they start off working in Photoshop and they go to Illustrator, there are some differences in the shortcuts. They will go into one of the programs and they will change them so that they match up so that they don't have to keep remembering the different ones, okay? Okay, so let's go back over here and talk about panels. So first of all, your panel on your left, these are your toolbars. Now you can have a single toolbar, or if you want to, you can go right here and do a double toolbar. I'll go back to single. Now, let me give you fair warning. If you're working on a laptop right now and you're having problems seeing like the colors or any of the stuff at the bottom, you're going to need to change your screen resolution. The laptop I am on is automatically set to 150%, and it always cuts off the bottom of my screen, or it blows everything so far up that you can't see it. You may have to change that screen resolution, and you simply go to your desktop, right click, and change your screen resolution. That is going to be a personal preference, and you can even, unchange the resolution whenever you need to and change it back. So it's really up to you. I do refer to it to my high school students as old man mode because it just blows everything up so much whenever you're in a higher resolution, and it just makes it hard to see. Okay, so those are where your toolbar is. We're going to go over all these toolbars options in just a few minutes. Over here on the right is going to be where all of your panels are. Now, luckily with all of the Adobe programs, you work with what's called floating panels. So if you need to move them or be able to see them better or anything like that, you can do that. I do know some people that work on double screens will sometimes open the panels on one screen while they're working on the other screen. That way it gives them a little bit more workspace. So these are really nice. And I'm going to show you kind of what I mean by that. So this is your panel options bar, your panel bar. So what we can do is we can put some of these panels into this bar and it'll automatically downsize them so that they're not taking up space. But at the same time, you can just click on them and they'll open right back up. You don't have to go up to like window and then open a panel up here. So it makes it a little bit easier too. Okay, so the first one on here is your history. If you click on it, you'll see the history options. History is really great to have at easy access because sometimes you want to see what you've done and be able to delete back to a certain point. You can use the shortcut Control Z to go back to undo something, but sometimes what you need to undo is like 3 or 4 steps back. This will let you see how far back you need to go. And then you also have the comments. I've never used this, but it is helpful whenever you're using Creative Cloud. If you're using the libraries, you can share comments back and forth with other people working on the project with you. Okay, then you're just going to double arrow it right here to close it back down. Now, when we open this, you'll see that they're both in the same panel, same pop-out panel. That's because there's a little line underneath it. If you wanted them to be in separate panels, then you would just make sure that line was in between them. And the way you do that is just by dragging items. So what we're going to do is this color swatches, gradients, and patterns. You're not going to be using this all the time. So we're going to add this to your option bar just to make it there, but out of the way. So you simply are going to click on the word color and you're going to drag it down and you're going to drop it right here on the panel. I'm sorry, on the option bar. You can see that it turns blue and then release. Now for the next one for swatches, if we just dragged it and put it under this line, it would do the exact same thing that I was just saying. It would show it in 2 different panels. If you want to make them so that they're all in one panel like this was, then you're going to drop it right on top of the tool that's already there. So we're going to take swatches and we're going to drop it right on top of the color palette. and you can see, and you can even move them within the color palette if you want it to, or move them within this bar if you want to. So go ahead and continue dragging. Okay, and it should look something like this. Now, next is going to be your properties panel, your three options that go along with that. So the first one is properties. This is where you're going to be able to make some base adjustments. So you're going to be able to change the width and the height if you need it to of your canvas, which is this right here. You can change its position if you need it to flip to horizontal or flip to vertical. You can change your mode. And this panel right here will change depending on what tool that you're on and what panel that you are in. So this will change some, but most of the stuff will stay basic on here. The next one over here is your adjustments. This is where you can go in and make basic adjustments to brightness and contrast, levels. You can turn things black and white. We will be talking more about this panel in a future lesson. And then the last one is libraries. Libraries is great because this is a relatively newer feature where you can save things that you're working on and be able to share them between not only other programs, but also other people. I've used it before I had to design a invitation to an auction, and I did it all in here. I did all my little special stuff in here. I saved it in here. I did that in Illustrator. Then I had to work on the digital invitation in After Effects. So I was able to open up that library in After Effects and have all my little images that I needed. So it works really well that you don't have to like re-import them or reload them or anything like that. They're right there for your easy access. Okay, so, but right now we won't be using this a whole lot. So we're going to drag this and we're going to put it right up here under the history. So now you can see it, it's right here. Now, another thing about these is you don't have to do this step. I just want to do it real quick to show you how these work. If you were working on something and you needed this panel, you can open it, but you can also pull it over here and be able to have it as a floating one. So if you needed it to be in a different spot or anything like that, you can do that. It's just going to become a floating panel. You can also resize these. So if you put your cursor in between two areas, you can resize. You can change them. You can also do it this way. So you can make one bigger, one smaller. And I will tell you that that comes in handy a lot of times when you're working in this layers panel down here. A lot of times you want your layers panel to be a little bit bigger. You can stretch it up, do what you need to do. And if you need to stretch it back down to see the properties panel, you can do that as well. Okay. So layers is probably going to be one of the top areas that you are working in. I shouldn't say probably, it will be one of the top areas that you're working in. Whenever you're working in Photoshop, you think of layers kind of like clear plastic sheets laying on top of each other. If you do something on one plastic sheet, it'll show through the other plastic sheets. If you do something that fills up the entire plastic sheet, then it may block something on another plastic sheet. So the more layers you get, and again, this is something that we will be talking about more and more throughout the semester, you have to pay attention to what order your items are in over here in the layers panel. At the bottom, these are going to be all of your kind of adjustments that you can make down here. So this is where you're going to be able to do some special effects. That's where the FX is, like drop shadows or bevelos. You can create masks. Masks are gives you the option to hide certain parts of an image and then keep certain parts of an image. You have your adjustment layers right here. So you have the adjustments panels up here, but these are going to be non-destructive ones right here. You have a folder that you can group layers in. So like if you're doing a project, let's say you're making a poster and you want to keep all the text together in one group, you can create a folder right here, a new group, and put all of them in it and call it text and be able to find all your text at one time. The square with the plus sign, this is going to be both the new layer, so you can create a new blank layer, or you can drag a layer down there and make a copy of it. And then of course you have the trash can, which means you're going to delete a layer. Next over, you have channels. This is where you can work in your RGB, your red, green, blue, depending on the setting that you're in. So if you're in black and white, these will change, or if you're in, grayscale, if you're in a grayscale image, these can change. So depending on the type of mode that you're in, these can change. But this is where you find your RGBs. And then the last one is your paths. So you can create paths using the pen tool, using some of the different tools. Think of it kind of like outlining something with a tool or being able to create a shape. You can then do different things with those paths right down in here, and we will talk about paths for sure later in the semester. So I'm going to go back over to layers, and I want you to come down here and I want you to click on the square with the plus sign. Now you can see that we have what's called layer 1. It's a blank layer. Next to it, you'll see the little eyeball. That's how you turn a layer off and on. And then you can see a little lock right here. That means that layer is locked. We can't do anything to it. You can lock layers using this lock right here, and you can also unlock them. Those come in handy whenever you're working between layers, and sometimes you'll be working between two layers and both of them have something very close to each other. You want to move one but not the other. If you lock the layer, then you can make adjustments to the one. You can always go back and unlock it. It also helps you keep from damaging layers that you don't want to damage. So we know that we don't want to do anything exactly to this photo. We want to do something on top of it. Then we can just lock it and it won't affect it. Right here above it too is where you're going to find the opacity. Right now it's set to 100%. You can you can lower and up the opacity so you can see through something. You're going to have your blend modes right here, which we're going to talk about in a later lesson as well. Okay, so those are kind of the basis that you need to know on your panels that are already out here. But there are some panels that you might want to use that aren't already out here. So let's add a few more to our bar. So we're going to come up here to window and we're going to do brushes. Now, when you open it, it'll automatically put it onto your bar, which is really nice. Brushes comes in super handy to have out just so you can change the settings really quickly, which you have the brush settings right here and the brushes right here. So this comes in really handy. Another great thing about brushes with Photoshop is yours is going to look slightly different than mine. That's because I've made some personal brushes, custom brushes. I've also downloaded this one right here, which is called Grun Brushes. You can Google brushes, Photoshop brushes online and find all kinds of free great brushes. So like these look like, you can't see them, but they look like little cracks and breaks and stuff like that. Okay, so so now we'll have our brushes out here. Oh, now you can see my brush. If you look at my cursor, I'm going to change it back before I forget. There we go. Okay, and then the next set of brushes that we want to put on here is going to be our character brushes. So you're going to go right up to window and find character and select that. And now it's going to put our text and our paragraph options on here as well. And we're going to shrink that back over. Now we kind of have this going the way we want. You can always add to it, but this is a nice base one for us to start from. So we're going to come up to Window, Workspace, and do New Workspace. Now you can name it whatever you want to name it. And then you're going to hit Save. So I called my original one SCC. Just because I work between two different schools, but you can call it whatever you want and then hit Save. Then when you come back in here, you'll see under Workspace, you should have one named whatever you named it. Okay, so there we go. So now let's talk about our tool panel. So now that we have this new document, our new layer over here in our layers panel, anything we do now is going to take place on top of our original image. So if we were to, for example, if I draw on here or paint on here, Thought I grabbed my paint tool. I did not. My paintbrush. There we go. If I was to paint on here, it would be non-destructive to the image that I'm using. I highly suggest that you get in the practice of using extra layers when you're doing stuff, especially at first, so that you can learn how to do these things and not actually destroy your image. Once you start working in it more, then it's going to change that a little bit more, okay? Next, let's come over. So as we change these tools and click on different tools, you're going to see my option bar up at the top change, and it changes based on the tool that I'm using. Some of the other Adobe programs, as you do it, you'll see your properties panel change, but our properties panel right here will stay pretty much the same through the different tools. There are a few tools that can make some difference to that, but most of the time it's just going to change up here on the top. Okay, the first tool that you're going to come to, and also if you notice, if you just hover over the different tools, it's going to give you a quick little synopsis of what they are. But the first tool that we come to is going to be our move tools. Now, if you see this little bitty arrow in the bottom of any of your tools, that means that there's more options than just the one that you're on. So under the move tools, I'm going to click on it and kind of hold my mouse for a second. It'll pop up. Here's where you're going to find your move tool and your artboard tool. For now, the move tool is going to be the important one out of the two, and it's going to allow you to move things that you've put onto your image. The next three tools are going to all be part of your selection tools. For lesson 3, we will be working exclusively with these and kind of be talking about what each of the different tools do. But just so you kind of have a base idea, the first set of them are your like shape marquee tools. So if you want to create a rectangle or a square or an oval or a circle, that's where you're going to find these. You're also going to have these single row marquee tools. I have not used these a whole lot, but they do literally can just create one single row. They're really super skinny. The next set of tools down is going to be your lasso tools. So you have lasso, you have the poly lasso and the magnetic. The lasso tool is going to let you freeform a selection. The poly is going to let you freeform, but it's going to keep it in straight lines. And then the magnetic is going to read your tones and your colors, and it's going to kind of tell you where you're going to be selecting around. So with the magnetic lasso, it would work really well on like this bright orange against this blue. But when you have something like this blue cloth against this blue, it can give you a little bit of problems, but not bad. Just it takes a little bit to learn it. The next set of selection tools down is going to be where you're going to find your quick selection tools. So you have your magic wand. Almost everybody knows how to use a magic wand. They've done it. If they haven't done it in Photoshop, they've done it in some other program. It allows you to come over here and pick, and it reads off tones and colors and values, and it will pick the area. You can make adjustments to its tolerance, which is right up here. Okay, so that you can pick a little or more. So if I was to click right here and I was on like a 5 tolerance, it would only pick certain shades of that blue, where if I was on 80, it would pick other shades of that blue. Quick selection tool is one of my favorite tools, one of my favorite selection tools. What it allows you to do is kind of go in and it will automatically read for you again, but you can kind of draw over an area and it'll read everything within that area. So even if it's not the same colors or values, it'll still read over it. And then the object selection tool, this is a great tool, but it's still a little bit of a newer tool. So it does have some hiccups sometimes. But what it allows you to do is draw a rectangular marquee around something, and then it will make the selection based on what's inside of there. So like if I was to draw a rectangle around these blueberries, whoops, wrong tool. Use the object selection tool. I draw a square around these blueberries. It's going to think about it for a minute, and it's going to tell me what it thinks the selection should be. Oh, and I'm on the wrong layer, so it won't let me do it anyway. You have to be on the correct layer. So Now it does, I have noticed that it does take it a little while depending on how much information you have inside of there. Um, Also, this is an AI tool, so it does get smarter as you keep using it. And you can see that it told me that what should be in here is the little bowl along with a little bit of the shadow. Okay. Um, I'm going to do Control Z to get out of, or Control D to deselect it, Control D, and go back to my other layer just to make sure I don't damage anything. The next one down is going to be your crop tools. So the crop tools will allow you to come up here and you can tell it that you want to crop to its original ratio. If you want to tell it what width, size, and resolution it should be at, this is the one that I use the most, I think. This is also really nice because it gives you some of the most common presets as well. So, you know, if you need something to be a square, or if you need it to be an 8.5 by 11, this is already in here. Other things in there is the perspective crop tool. If you get stuck in the perspective crop tool, you do have to use a special shortcut to get out. I believe it's like Control Shift I or something like that. We'll talk about that whenever we use that tool. Then you do have slice tools up here as well. So if you've ever used Illustrator, you have some slice tools. And I just zoomed out. There we go. The next one over is going to be your framing tool. Then you have your eyedropper. The eyedropper is going to be where you can choose colors from. This is really handy whenever you're working in something and you know, like you want your text to be this exact shade of orange over this blue. Then you can use your eyedropper to pick that color. You do have some other eyedroppers in here. The 3D material eyedropper, I think you'll go over with the book lesson later in the semester. You have a color sample tool. Then you also down here have a ruler tool, a note tool, and a 1, 2, 3 count tool. I have never actually used any of these in all the time that I've been working in Photoshop, but I'm sure they have a good purpose. The count tool is kind of funny because you can like literally select over a bunch of polka dots or something and it'll tell you how many are in there. I've been told that the note tool is really nice if you're working with other people on a project, you can make little notes. The next set down is going to be your healing tools. So you have your spot healing tool, your healing tool, your patch tool. These will all allow you to pick an area on your project and then be able to make adjustments to them. So like, let's say you're doing a portrait of a child and they have a little spot of dirt on, they have a spot of dirt on their face, or they have acne. You can do one of these two tools right here, these healing tools, and it will get rid of them for you. What they do is they read the areas around the selection and kind of fill it in. The patch tool allows you to pick something and then drag it somewhere else to be able to pick up that area. So let's say there's a plane in the sky and you want the plane to go away. So you can select around the plane and drag it over to another part of the sky, and it might match the clouds or it'll match the sky color itself. And content aware move tool. With content aware, what it allows you to do is pick an area and then you can tell it that you want it to read the entire picture or a certain part of the picture, and it will fill in that area for you and remove something. For example, I do a lot of work for the butterfly house, and I have to, like when they hang the cocoons up, they are the chrysalis. They hang them up with a little pin, a push pin, and I can use content aware, draw around it, and it'll fill it in for me. Content aware works really well for when there's a lot of detail there. It's also an AI tool, so it gets smarter the more you use it. And you do have the red eye tool down here, and what it does is it reads the red on the eyes and it helps make an adjustment to put them back to black. You have the paintbrush tool, the pencil tool are both under this area. You also have the mixer brush tool, which you'll do in the lesson a couple lessons from now. The paintbrush is literally like painting with a paintbrush. You can come up here. As long as you have your paintbrush tool selected, you come up to your option bar and you can change the size of your brush. You can also change the hardness of your brush. So if it's 100%, and let me make my brush a little bit bigger, and you click on something, you're going to get that nice hard round circle. Sometimes you want that. Sometimes you want it to have a little bit of blur to its edge. So you can come down here and adjust your hardness down. So I went to 0, and you're going to see now it's more of a soft blur. Okay, so you can make those changes whenever you want. Again, to get, if you're doing this along with me and you don't want to keep the look, you can do Control Z to go back a step, and it'll get rid of it for you. You do also have the options in this brush panel up here that you can change to some of the other preset brushes. Here, you can also change the direction. Now with a round brush, it's not gonna make a huge difference. You're not gonna see the change in direction. You can't rotate it. But let's say you had a brush that was shaped like an L and you wanted it to be an upside down L, then you can adjust it. Okay. Under that same area, I said there's the pencil tool. A pencil is like literally writing with a pencil. It's going to give you that nice thin line. That's going to be more like writing with a pencil. It is a freeform tool, so you can just kind of write with it as much as you want. I personally, when I use the pencil tool, I use the stylus on my laptop. Then you can draw with it or write with it. I'm going to change that back to paintbrush. Okay, the next set of tools down is going to be your stamp tools. The clone stamp, what it allows you to do is pick one little area and you can clone it somewhere else so that you can match it up if you want it to. So let's say we wanted this little coffee bean right here. We can move the little coffee bean up here. Well, we actually wouldn't be moving it. We'd be cloning it somewhere else. Next tool down is your history brush tools. Then you have your eraser tools. This eraser tool is the one that you're going to use the most. There is a magic eraser that allows you to work kind of like the magic wand. That is the magic eraser. Next one down is going to be where you find your paint bucket and your gradient tool. So the paint bucket will allow you to take a color and dump it over an entire area, over an entire selection. The gradient tool will allow you to create gradients that go, you know, from light to dark or dark to light or multiple colors. We will talk about that in a later lesson as well. You have the blur, the sharpen, and the smudge tool. The blur tool is these are kind of, to me, like you're coloring like when you're little. So the blur tool is going to make something blurry. The sharpen tool is going to help make it a little bit sharpened, and it does that by adjusting the contrast. And the smudge tool is going to be like you're playing with finger paints. So like if you had a painting of something, you stuck your fingers in it and you pulled it, that's what the smudge tool is going to do. The next set of tools down, these are going to be your photography tools. So if you've ever worked in a dark room, that's where these terms come from. The first one is your dodge tool. It lightens. It'll just lighten whatever you go over. The burn tool is going to darken, and the sponge tool is going to take out some of its saturation. Now you can make adjustments to all of these up here at the top again. The dodge and the burn tool are really nice because you can work with either your shadows, your midtones, or your highlights. So let's say you're working on a photograph of somebody like that was outside on an extremely sunny day. They have really, really harsh shadows. Then you can come in here with your dodge tool and be able, if you change this to shadows, you can change the shadows. Now, I always suggest with your exposure, start with your exposure being really low, like between 10 and 20. That way you can, every time you go over it, it'll do it a little bit more. So let me make a copy of my background right here and I can kind of show you what I'm saying. But every time you go over it, it'll lighten it a little bit more. Where if you start at a really high number, it will automatically just do it all at once and you don't have as much control over it. There we go. See if I got them all out. Yep. Same thing with the burn tool. A lot of people start off with the burn tool really, really high. Oh, that one doesn't have any. Let's do highlights. So if you go over it once and let go of your mouse and go over it again, and see, it can get kind of gray and yucky pretty quick. So if you start off with a lower number, it works better. The next set of tools down is your pen tools. Pen tools, if you've used Illustrator, you use the pen tool a lot in Illustrator. It's one of those tools you just have to learn, and we will learn to play with it in a couple lessons. Pen tool can draw lines, draw shapes. You can create marquees with it. You can create selections, all kinds of stuff. But these are all the tools that go along with it. Next tool is going to be your type tool. So you have a horizontal type and a vertical type. Then you have your path selection tool and a direct selection tool. They're right down here. You have your shape tools. So you have rectangles, ellipses, triangles, polygons, lines, and then you can create custom shapes. I don't use the custom shapes one very often because you can do the same thing using a lot of your other tools. You then have your hand tool and your rotate view tool. These two are really, really good to know where they're at, because if you move your artboard on your screen, this is how you fix them. Sometimes people will accidentally hit the wrong shortcuts and rotate their main picture like 20%, and so it's at an angle and you need to straighten it back out. This is the tool where you do it. And then the last one is going to be your zoom tool. Zoom tool, you can actually click on the zoom tool and you can zoom in. You can come up here to the top and choose the zoom out. But the shortcuts for this are even easier. You can do Control minus to zoom out, Control plus to zoom in, and Control 0 to make it fit your screen. If you're working on a Mac, my shortcuts are not going to probably work for you. You can Google Photoshop Mac shortcuts and find them. I believe it's just Command plus, Command minus, and Command 0 on this one, but I'm not positive. And I know a lot of the other ones are completely different. So if you're working on a Mac, just Google it. Next down, you can edit your toolbar. So if you want to add anything to it, you can come in here to edit toolbar. And then below that, here's where you're going to find your foreground and your background colors. So if you're painting on something, you can change this. You can click on it, double click on it, you get your color picker. This is really nice. A lot of people forget that it's here. If you just click on this little black and white square, it'll set you back to default. And then if you click on the arrows, it'll flip your foreground and background color back and forth. This is really nice if you're working on something. Let's say you're working on text and you want to use two specific colors for that text. You can set them as these two colors, your foreground and your background. Then while you're writing, it'll use your foreground color. And then if you want to write some more and the other color, then you can just flip them and it would put that as your main. Then if you come right down here, this is going to show you the different modes. And then this one right here is going to give you different screen modes. So you can do it in full screen with a menu, or standard screen. And we're going to stay in standard screen. And of course I said that, and then it knocks me out of it. And then you can just hit escape to go back. Okay, so now most of you don't have this layer, so I'm going to get rid of it. So right now we have these two layers. So the next thing to kind of talk about is how you're going to save projects. So the first thing you're going to do is come up and do File and Save. And then this will allow you to save it to wherever you want to save it to. I always suggest that you name it. I have everybody name it their last name underscore and then whatever lesson it is. For this, it would actually be a tutorial. So tutorial 1. And then you're going to notice that it's going to save it as a Photoshop file. Why is it saving it as a Photoshop file? Because we have these two layers over here. If you wanted to go back and work on it later, you would want it to be saved as a PSD file, a Photoshop file. That way it saves those layers for you and you can come in here, do your work, save it again, come in here, do your work, save it again. So you just hit save. Now, for this class, though, I don't want you saving, I don't want you turning in your PSDs. I'd rather you be turning in your, flattening it and turning it as a JPEG. It's going to save space and it's just going to be able to load faster. And then I don't have to download everything to be able to see what you've done. So unless I tell you to turn in your PSD, which I will have you do on your midterm, I believe, in your final, you're just going to turn in a JPEG. A JPEG is a compressed. So once you save it as a JPEG, that JPEG file will no longer have layers in it. That's why you save it as a PSD first. If something goes wrong, you can always go back to that PSD. Or if I told you to write your name on it and put it to do something specific in it, then you would be able to go in and fix that if you didn't do it. Okay, but to save it as a JPEG, the easiest way to do it is to come over here to these 3 little lines or 4 little lines, whatever they are right here on the layers, and flatten the image. You'll then notice that you have just one layer. And if you go up to File and Save As, you can choose JPEG as an option. And it'll save it. It'll ask you for your JPEG options. I always tell everybody to go ahead and do between 10 and 12, just to keep it at a high quality. Hit OK. And then that's the file you're going to submit to Canvas today. So I'm just having you submit the same image just to show that you walked through it with us and that you did hear me. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, shoot me an email, and we will try and get you an answer. I do want to let you know that not all the videos are going to be as long as these first few videos, just because we have so much to go over in the first few videos to get you started. Some of the other videos will be shorter and you'll have to do a little bit of work on your own instead of watching me or listening to me talk. Okay. So again, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. I'm here to give you some answers.